March 13th, 1997. This event called Lights Over Phoenix. What did you see?
Well, I saw a huge craft just kind of come right over Squaw Peak. That was, it was just breathtaking. And I'm not sure about the date. You've got a better memory
March
for the
13th.
dates than I do. Yeah.
But there was no, like the Clinton day, no.
No. No, I was on a strict diet. No, I'm serious. I'm serious now. That it was unquestionably it was a UFO, which means unidentified flying object.
Right. Doesn't mean we're being visited.
Well, it's nothing like anything I've ever seen.
And you're an Air Force guy.
Yeah, yeah, and a pilot. Got a lot of hours flying, so it was pretty breathtaking. And I'll never forget. I snuck out to see it, without DPS, which I'm not supposed to be driving my own car and that kind of thing. And so, but I told Ann what I was doing. I was going to go up to Squaw Peak and see what everybody was, clamoring about. And when I walked in the front door, she looked at me, and I was apparently just, normally I'm fair complected and pale anyway, right? And she said, "Oh my gosh," she said, "she looked like a ghost. What did you see?" And I said, "Well, I don't know what I saw, but it was really something, and I'm not going to talk about it." And
wow.
So,
did it frighten you?
No, I think I was kind of in awe, really,
How big?
Bigger than anything I've ever seen in the sky.
Like an aircraft carrier in the sky?
Yeah, something like that, yeah. And it was hard to define because of the light in terms of the size, but it was absolutely silent and had sort of eerie embedded lights, and so that's what I saw. And I wasn't expecting to see anything because I was looking out over at Luke, to the west, and then all of a sudden these people in the park area just on the west side of 51, there were a bunch of people there. Everybody said, "Oh, look at that." And we turned around, and this thing was coming from the northwest, traveling to the southeast.
We now know, and it really hit me when we were watching the Diamondbacks in Game 7, and the B-1 flew over the bottom.
It wasn't a B-1 bomber.
But that thing all of a sudden out of nowhere appears. And, I said to somebody that night, I said, well, when they do test these, they test them in populated areas. They're new stuff. They test it to see if people detect it. Do you believe it was ours? Do you believe it was something from the U.S. government that they were kind of flying around?
No, it wasn't even close to a B. It was much bigger than a B-1. A B-1 actually isn't that big.
Right.
I mean, if it's at low altitude, it'll appear big, but no, this was totally different.
Something, though, that you think our own government may have been kind of running by a populated area to see what would happen?
Well, they certainly achieved their goal of stirring the pot, if that's what they were doing. But I don't think so. I think this was technologically far advanced. I use the analogy. Can you imagine if you took Christopher Columbus and put him in the cockpit of a Boeing 777? What his reaction would be? He wouldn't understand it. He would be convinced that this is something from another world,
Is that what?
And I really believe that. I believe that. But I've always been open to that. We're not alone in the universe.
I agree with you.
We're going to find that out one way or the other. Even Bill Clinton was talking about that the other day on the national news.
I saw that.
Yeah.
I do believe that we're not alone. I just don't know that we've been visited. But you think maybe that night we were?
I think so. Yeah. There've been so many different sort of sightings and inexplicable phenomena that, But the disparity in terms of technological progress would be so vast that we would be, I think, of sort of no consequence to whoever is visiting us, because the technology to get here would be just beyond anything we could imagine.
Did it hover?
No, it was just going in a straight line.
Slow pace?
Yeah, slow pace, yeah. And then, there were all the sightings.
Flares.
There were the sightings of the America West plane coming into Sky Harbor, said he could have landed on it.
It was enormous.
Yeah.
Like an aircraft carrier in the sky? Is that about as close as you could?
I think that's a fair description,
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Maybe it's our next generation we're working on. Who knows?
Well, we'll find out someday.
Did the Joint Chiefs of Staff talk to you or concern you about the unknown and the unidentified flying object?
Oh yes, we discussed it at every conference that we had with the military, and they never were able to make me a concrete report on.
Do you have anything on the subject, sir?
No, I haven't had anything on the subject, and there's always things like that going on. Flying saucers, and they've had other things,
Bowyer, a man with more than 20 years flying experience under his wing, so to speak, saw something extraordinary which later made those headlines as he flew at 4,000 feet near Guernsey. And so did quite a few of his passengers, and so did the pilot of another aircraft that was flying nearby, flying over Sark. And Captain Bowyer is here now to tell his story. Thank you for coming in, and thank you for speaking out, because I know from private conversations I've had over the years with the commercial pilots, sometimes when I'm up in a cockpit with them, they do see things, and they tend not to report them because they don't want to be laughed at or have their careers jeopardised.
Exactly.
So why have you decided to speak out about it?
Well, I didn't actually decide to speak out at all. Actually, the press asked the company, which I work for, to would I mind doing an interview, and the company, being quite a forward-thinking firm, had no objection. In fact, pretty much actively encouraged it. So that's how it happened, really.
Well, how did the press get hold of it then? Did passengers?
I don't know. I really don't know.
You weren't the only person who saw
No,
this phenomenon,
that's right.
were you? There,
No.
there were some passengers who saw it, and
Yeah.
also another pilot.
Yes.
Simultaneously. Well, look, we've got an artist's impression that we knocked up here this afternoon on our computer paint box. Is that kind of what you saw? Is that a reasonable...
No.
Oh, well, it's the best we did.
I'll be honest, yeah.
Well, hold that picture.
Well, it's pretty
you describe it to us.
Well, it was a brilliant yellow object. The brightness you've got there, about 2/3 from left to right. It was a graphite grey section. If you want to call it a fuselage, we don't know yet what it was. We're looking into it.
And how big was it?
It's difficult to say once again, but I saw it from 50 miles away. So any object from 50 miles away must have been fairly enormous.
What about a mile long?
It's possible, yeah.
Did it move at all?
It probably didn't move, but I had the great opportunity the other day from Jersey Air Traffic Control, visiting their radar room, and some interesting traces, let's put it that way, from the radar
Really?
indicate that there's a possibility that they did pick up from both Guernsey and Jersey radar traces, spurious traces they call, for around about 55 minutes.
How long did you see it for?
I saw it in total for 12 minutes.
Can I show you a picture? This is, I'm sure you've seen this picture. It's of lenticular clouds, a very rare but known formation. This was taken some years ago. Could it have been something like that? Could it have been some very, very strangely formed cloud, do you think?
No. Well, I think highly unlikely. I've seen lots
why?
of lenticularis in my time, but just doesn't look like a cloud.
Well,
really.
you've seen a lot of clouds over the last
I also had
days.
the opportunity of looking at these objects, there were two of them, through binoculars, 10 times magnification, and in my view, a very definite object inside controlled airspace, which shouldn't have been there.
What happened? Did you simply lose contact with it? Did it disappear?
Well, I was landing. It was a general flight from Southampton going to Alderney, and the only reason I lost sight of it was because I descended through a haze layer, which is fairly common in that area. And having descended through the haze layer, couldn't see it anymore. But it's almost certainly still there.
Did the other pilot who was flying over Sark, the island of Sark, did he report it in exactly the same terms?
Yes, because it was sighted, or they were sighted inside controlled airspace. The pilot's under a legal obligation, and I suspect this is where the press
Stories come from.
And he's filed a report exactly the same as I have.
Well, let's show you a couple of pictures from the UFO file books. These are genuine UFOs in the sense that no one's ever been able to explain what they are, but they happen. They're not fakes.
Well, that's
over New
I must say
Mexico.
that's very similar to the sort of thing that I saw, yeah.
Well, that
and my passengers.
That was famously
I haven't seen this
taken
one
over New Mexico in 1957, and it's not a cloud. That much we do know. I don't know what it is, but it's not a cloud.
Not a cloud. Analysis showed that it wasn't a cloud, but they don't know what it was, hence UFO. This is one from Russia in 1989. Again, analysis shows it's a genuine object. It's not a cloud. There is a cloud above it, a faint one, but that object is not a cloud. Again, is that something...
Well, so the object I saw was a very brilliant yellow
Much brighter
colour.
than that.
Yeah, much brighter. It's emitting light.
Good. It was emitting. You think it was
No, I think so.
emitting light?
Well, there was cloud above it and all the way down to Guernsey. And,
So it could have been reflecting sunlight.
yeah.
Well, that was what I first thought before I looked at it through the binoculars, that there's a lot of vineries called greenhouses in Guernsey, and the sun may have been reflecting from one of these vineries to the aircraft. You often see them in France as well, on the way down to the Channel Islands, and because the aircraft moves position and the reflections are fixed in place, they often disappear. They always disappear. This one didn't disappear; it just stayed stationary.
If you had to take an instinctive guess, and I'm saying it's guess, so I'm not asking for professionals, because how could you possibly know? Would you say that it was something of this planet or something from outer space?
Extremely difficult. I mean, I think a few years ago you interviewed Dr. David Clarke on a very similar sort of thing.
did, yeah.
About 4 years ago. I spoke to him today. He's in charge of a team that's looking into this at the moment. I have been asked a question by the press, and my simple answer was, I don't think it's from around here. I can't speculate any further than that. But there is some information which is now being looked at, and hopefully better come back one day and give you an answer to this. But at the moment, it's...
Well,
it's an unknown.
When you fly now, I mean, do you have a sort of slightly heightened awareness of what may be going on around you?
I think, yes, definitely. Yeah, it's not the first object I've seen personally, and I've spoken to a lot of other commercial pilots since this has happened, and they've said on the quiet, come around the corner, I want to tell you about what I saw.
Absolutely,
and I think what's going to happen now, this may have opened the can, and I think what all professional pilots out there ought to be looking at is actually reporting everything they see and actually getting it itemised and written into the CIA, and then perhaps we will find out.
Well, I have to say, the unofficial first-hand accounts I've, as I say, had from professional pilots, many of them with as much experience as you have, and they're not putting me on, you know, are extraordinary. Some things that some guys have seen. Some see nothing in an entire career. We interviewed a British Airways pilot who also came out in the 1960s. He saw a silver disc, didn't he? He picked it up on his radar. It was picked up on ground radar over the Bay of Biscay. Pretty big, and it travelled at immense speed, way faster than the speed of sound, and disappeared under his right wing. And it was a round silver disc, you know, like they're supposed to be. Extraordinary.
Well, this object looks like a CD disc on edge, if you like, but very sharp and extremely well defined.
Well, thank you very much for coming in and describing it to us. That's fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you, Will.
I got scrambled one night, and my first orders are, you will be ordered to fire on this mission.
In just a few minutes, he was over the North Sea in a fighter like this at 31,000 feet, traveling nearly the speed of sound. In the dark and in the clouds, Milton saw the strongest signal he had ever seen on his radar screen.
Bigger than the target was there, and the target looked like an aircraft carrier. It was that big on my screen.
He flew toward it to try and shoot it down. And it takes off like you're just standing still.
Like I wasn't even there. Like I wasn't even there. Just gone.
Milton has no earthly explanation for what he saw. Could it have been a problem with the radar? Could it have been a weather phenomenon?
No.
Could it have been a meteor? Any of those things?
Everything was explained to me already.
Yeah?
I knew what it was. It was some design of an aircraft by some space alien.